Hello, good morning to everyone who's joining right now. Thanks for being here. We're going to give everyone just a couple of more minutes to get on. Just a reminder for the chat feature, be sure to click on all panelists and attendees in the two fields just to make sure the message is viewable by everyone. We're just going to give everyone another minute and then we're going to get started just for the sake of time. Everyone's really excited about the topic today, as am I. I think it's going to be a great way to start off the morning and also a topic that I'm sure we all need and want to talk about. Okay, so we're going to get started. I'm just going to start off with some housekeeping items as usual. I already mentioned the chat feature. So you guys are awesome. We've had such high levels of participation and questions in the chat feature. So let's keep that up for today's session. Whether you have comments, whether you have questions, put them all in the chat feature. I will keep note of all the questions and be sure to ask them to our speakers today. Just as always, I feel like I don't need to say this, but I will always just be respectful and lead with empathy in anything that you put on the chat. I know this group does not have any issues with that. So thank you guys all for being here. It's the third session. I can't believe that we're here already. The turnout has been amazing so far. The feedback has been amazing so far, and I'm looking forward to continuing that with today's session. Just some quick points. I'm going to make it about the Zoom registration. Let's not forget to be sure to register with your name and email in Zoom, and then you will get a link for the session. So if anyone's having difficulties getting on or can't find the link, please let them know they actually have to register, and a link will then be sent to them. The next point is on the evaluation. So the evaluations are going to go out after our June 30th session, so after next week. And in the evaluation, you will have a place to put your TES number and which sessions you attended. That's how we'll be giving credit. So if anyone, colleagues, friends that are not on this call that were wondering, please spread that word that CHES credits will be given once the evaluation is filled out. That's really the only way that we'll know how to track and have all of your test numbers. I think that's it. If I think of anything else that I missed, I'll be sure to hit on it after the session. But I want to jump right in. We have an amazing speaker for today. We have Mary Fowler, followed by Karen Weinstein, who's going to be leading us through yoga and meditation. So if you aren't in a comfortable spot in your home already, it's fine if you're, obviously in a chair, but we will be meditating together and doing some yoga and some breathing towards the end of the session. But we are going to start with our wonderful speaker today, Mary Fowler. So Mary is a professional and personal development consultant and strategic coach who specializes in trauma-informed care and adverse childhood experiences, ADHD, and everyday sort of wellness practices that we should all sort of keep in mind and incorporate. For a company called Positive Difference PC. She has a ton of experience. So as I mentioned before, her areas of expertise are trauma-informed care, ADHD, eating disorders, and everyday wellness practices. So she's an author of a best-selling book, Maybe You Know My Kid, the third edition. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of it or read it, but that is her book. And she has 3 additional books as well on ADHD, along with numerous articles for educators on providing appropriate interventions and positive behavioral support practices for students with emotional and behavioral challenges. Mary was also the project director for the Monmouth County Extreme Suicide Prevention Program and provided suicide awareness and education training to the general public, audiences, and organizations. After Superstorm Sandy, Mary worked as a disaster response crisis counselor for Hope and Healing as an emotional recovery trainer for Turning the Tide. Presently, she volunteers for Operation Callback, New Jersey's statewide COVID-19 response hotline. So she has a lot of experience, even in this global pandemic. So questions on that, questions on anything that she's speaking about today, please feel free to put in the chat feature. And I'm going to kick it over to Mary. Welcome, and thank you for being with us this morning.
Thanks, Fanika. It's very nice to be here, and I'm sorry I can't see all of your faces. That's one of the drawbacks of Zoom, right? I feed on the nonverbal interaction that we often get, but that's how we are. So I hope everybody is doing well today, and I know this is can be a very challenging topic. We have not a lot of time to cover something that's can be very complex and complicated, but I'm going to try to hit you with I don't want to use the word hit, bring you through the highlights of what it means to be trauma informed, and to frame these a little bit in the current state of affairs that we find ourselves in this country. Sanika, I didn't think of this before, but I had written an article with some basic coping skills in light of the pandemic, and I will be happy to send that to you to disseminate to everybody. And that may it's not necessarily all about trauma informed, but it is about coping and managing through these difficult times. Okay, so when we let's see, let me try it this way. Oh, here we go. Good. So when we're talking about trauma-informed care, there's a basis of a way that we want to be with people that we are working with and with ourselves. So knowing that possibly some of us on this call, and I know I personally have had my struggles with complex PTSD, which is what generated my passion here. We know that one of the things that work best when you're working with people who have trauma, whether you know about that or not, is number one, trauma-informed care is compassionate. And compassion is the ability not only to feel and be with another's suffering, but to be so moved by that suffering that we're driven to action. And self-compassion, when they do studies on people who've been exposed to traumatic events and who winds up with PTSD or less severe PTSD or no PTSD, self-compassion seems to play a very important role in that. So we can't stress that enough. In these times that we're in, we must be kind to ourselves, taking our rest, doing the things we need, and nurturing ourselves and those around us as best we can. Trauma is very much a story of stuff that has happened in the past. So when we're dealing with trauma-informed care, we try to stay present-focused, unless somebody is in a therapeutic situation. But in general, for organizations and things, we keep people involved in the present. And what can we do to take the next step? And the next step, of course, always needs to be framed within the essence of safety. Safety is a very important feature in trauma-informed care: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual safety. Trauma-informed care is strengths-based. We know that humans have a bias for survival, and in that bias, we can almost think of that a little bit as a negativity bias. We're always looking for what's wrong so that we can keep ourselves alive. But and with trauma-informed care, we understand that as humans, we have been gifted with a number of strengths. Some of these are collective, some of these are individual. So we always want to acknowledge what are our strengths and what we bring to the table. So here's my first invitation to you. When you get some quiet time later today, or if you can make that sanctuary space, sit down and make a list of what are my strengths? What are the resources I have used? We don't often, trauma survivors don't often think of themselves as brave and strong. And they are. It takes a lot of strength to survive tough times. And I think we're finding that out now with the COVID-19 pandemic and all of the social and racial social justice and racial justice issues that are coming to us. And it's very important that we put everything in a framework of what are our strengths, how can we get better? And trauma-informed care is also respectful, it is responsive, and it is resourceful. And by respectful, we very often, just as we do in the suicide prevention model, we don't say to people things like, well, that wasn't that bad, that happened to me too, and you should be feeling this way or you should be that way. So I guess the center of all trauma-informed care is, as the Bishop of Rumbek, I was in South Sudan a number of years ago, and he said to me, it doesn't take a superstar to work with trauma, it takes a person who knows how to listen. So we want to listen with respect, responsiveness, and resourcefulness. So I thought it was a good idea to talk about right now, what is the difference between stress and traumatic stress? So stress, of course, is a normal biological function. We need stress. Stress kind of helps us get motivated and activated. But when we are talking about stress, we're not talking about eustress, the good stress, the stress that's EUSTRESS, the good stress. We're talking about stress that takes an impact on our biology. So one of the things I also want to be sure you understand is trauma is very much a biological, physical, felt sense experience. And when people with trauma get stressed, it can make them more symptomatic and have more difficulty with coping and managing. Traumatic stress is the type of stress that keeps us on our toes, worried, fearful, anxious. That type of stress says there's something that's threatening, that's life-threatening or emotionally threatening, that I'm perceiving as threat. And certainly in the initial days of the COVID-19 pandemic, weren't we all, I mean, I know about you, I shouldn't speak for you, but I was holding my breath with my mask on, with everything I had to do whenever I had to go into a grocery store. You know, so you could see the whole body going up, clenching in, stressing, doing all of that. That's traumatic stress. That's the stress that says to me, I don't have control, I feel very vulnerable, and I feel very helpless. And that is a key feature when we're talking about trauma. So the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, provides this definition of trauma. So there are three things that you need to think about. It's the event, the experience of the event, and the effect of the event. So with the event, individual trauma results from an event or a series of events. So it doesn't have to be one thing. It could be just hitting a critical mass, a series of events or circumstances that the person experiences as physically or emotionally harmful or life-threatening. So one of the things I didn't put in the slide deck, but I want to talk to you about briefly, particularly in a public health setting, is the Public Health Administration named child abuse as probably the #1 public health problem facing America today. That was before COVID-19. COVID-19 is an emergent, this is an ongoing. So we know that many people, when we talk about what is that series of events, they can come to us with a history of adverse childhood experiences. Adverse childhood experiences are things that range from physical, emotional, mental, and neglect or abuse, sexual abuse, the death of a parent, an incarcerated parent, exposure to neighborhood violence. And basically, these are the events that put the biology constantly on the alert, on the sense of there is threat and there is danger and I am fearing for my life. So that is the event. The experience, so the event is the circumstances experienced by the individual as physically or emotionally life-threatening. And finally, the effect is it has a lasting adverse effect. And listen to what the lasting adverse effect is on physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually. So very often trauma healing and dealing with trauma requires a mix of all types of therapeutic modalities, which is why it's wonderful to close this Zoom today with yoga. Yoga is fantastic. SAMHSA also, in their call for trauma-informed care, they put out 4 things they would like everybody to do and what is the substance of a good trauma-informed program. And I also think of this as the substance of a valuable personal approach as well. Number 1, we have to realize the impact of trauma. You know, for too long, children in particular, we were told, well, you know, children get over it. That was the myth that we lived by. And the ACEs research, adverse childhood experiences research, has shown us that children don't just get over it. As a matter of fact, these issues, the issues of childhood, very much can become the maladaptations and problems in adulthood, and from the whole public health spectrum, whether you're talking about abuse, mental illness, downward social economic drift, job loss, more divorces, hypertension, diabetes, so much. So we have to realize the impact that trauma has. It's not enough to say that was then, this is now. realize that. We have to recognize the symptoms, the signs and symptoms that someone has been traumatized. And I apologize, but with such a short period of time, I didn't put all of those up. I will, but do understand that trauma will display physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually in the immediate aftermath of a traumatic event, or sometimes early trauma doesn't show up until later in life when something happens, and then, you know, the whole house comes tumbling down in a way. We recognize hyperarousal, that the body goes into this, you know, elevated state where the body senses and thoughts are highly attuned and aroused, and that is very much the feeling of what anxiety can be. At the same time, there's also a constriction, a muscle tensing. This is why yoga has been researched and is proposed as one of the very important trauma healing things, because when people get stuck in trauma, everything's constricted. And in yoga, people learn to start softening their tissues, relaxing and easing and feeling their bodies again. Dissociation is when they disconnect or go numb. Blank stares, nothing's going in, nothing's really going out. They're in a situation that's conflictual and they just kind of fade into the background. People will have denial, and I think we're seeing a lot of this with the COVID-19 response. We're seeing people look at this as this isn't really happening, or it's no big deal, you know, and so that is, again, pleasant physical sensation. And of course, there's also things associated with the feelings of helplessness, of being immobile, and the freeze response, which is, I can't think, I can't act, I don't know what to do. And you might see this a lot with people in the public health, in your comings and goings. So what else, respond. When we respond, this is the reason that trauma-informed care has become such an important aspect of all types of organizational development, whether even on the corporate level and on the business level. You know, we realize now that a lot of workers, because of COVID-19, are going to be having very difficult times. How do I show up at my workplace? Is this safe? What do I do? And we need to respond that is not somebody being paranoid. That is somebody being very deeply concerned and feeling that they're in a dangerous situation. So the experience of trauma is trying to get to safety. And when there is danger, or the perception of danger, that person will tend to immobilize and not move. And finally, we want to resist re-traumatization. So a lot of the work that I've done has been in working with school districts, educating teachers, doing on-site work with strategic coaching, and a lot of the things that we can do or we can say would be re-traumatizing to individuals. And even the same in public health or therapeutic situations where somebody says, you know, you should be over that by now. Or, you know, forget if that feels unsafe, just get do it. So those are some of the things by resisting re-traumatization. And when we're coming with people from a heart space of compassion, then we do resist re-traumatization. And we also need to be aware of, how do we re-traumatize ourselves? What are the thoughts, what are the things we say to ourselves that bring us to a feeling of, that put us down, that, you know, I'm not good enough, I should have done this, oh, why didn't I? You know, this constant beating up on self. Sandra Bloom came up with the self model, the human universals for people impacted by trauma. Sandra Bloom is located in Philadelphia, and she was one of the early pioneers of trauma response and recovery. And her model is called the sanctuary model. And right there and then, that tells us an awful lot about trauma-informed care. Trauma-informed care creates sanctuary, safe space, space where people know how to listen, listen actively without judgment. And so this is also a reason why being skilled in mindfulness and other disciplines that help us stay out of that judgment are very, very helpful. Okay, so people will have difficulty staying safe, finding emotions difficult to manage. They will have suffered many losses. Whoops, I don't know how I did that. They will lose emotional control, have many signs of loss, haunted by past, unable to move into a better future. And people with trauma also have a lot of difficulty envisioning a future, so they frequently will do things that are somewhat dangerous. And they will also get impacted by the fact that nobody came to help them. So what do we need to do? Number one, connection and belonging. People with trauma suffer from isolation. And we, of course, right now are in a situation of quote unquote social isolation. I have heard this better phrased as we are physically isolated but stay socially connected. And I think that's a very important distinction. So connection and belonging, how do you make a space for people to feel like they safely can belong, even when they may say that, you don't care about me really. Safety. If the minute a trauma survivor feels unsafe, they will want to run. They will move into avoidant behavior. So we want to be sure that we really consider that what we think of safety individually may not be safe for somebody else. And finally, stabilization and scaffolding. So stabilization is that we use grounding techniques that when somebody goes into a trauma reactive state, such as hyperarousal or constriction, we help them calm down. And I normally lead people in a breathing exercise, but because Karen will be here doing our yoga and meditation, we're not going to do that today. And the other thing when we talk about scaffolding, these essential elements, is to take small steps. For the person, a person who comes to mind, she had a very bad marriage, and 5 years after separation still hadn't filed for divorce. It was that traumatizing. So we broke it down into just very small steps. Why don't you download the forms you need? Do that. You don't have to do anything. So again, it's helping people move through in a very safe, connected, belonging, scaffold way. It's very important, of course, that we look at the strength-based and capacity building aspects of working with people. So acknowledging the effects of historical and structural conditions. I'm sorry, my top of my screen is, we want to first of all identify the strengths, the personal strengths an individual has. And that may even mean the strengths that are maladaptive coping mechanisms. We need to understand that people adapt behaviors that work in a way that we may not understand, but does indeed help them. So to start to see, when you see a behavior that looks like it's just the wrong way to solve that person's problem, perhaps understanding, or for yourself, how is this working for me? What's working? How is it working? You want to acknowledge the effects of any historical and structural conditions that continually bring trauma into play. I've done a lot of my on-site work in high poverty districts, and there is a lot of historical and structural issue there that reinforces the cycle. So again, we have to start very, very small on the elemental things. How do I feel I belong? How can there be connection and belonging, safety and stabilization? Social emotional learning has become a very important driver in the education community, and probably needs to be an important driver in the workplace community and all communities as well. We need to teach and model skills. A lot of people, when you're stuck in survival, they don't know, they don't use, perhaps have never learned skills that help them know how to make contact and connection, and things of that nature. So the social emotional learning skills are things like self-management, emotional regulation, problem solving and decision making, self-regulation. All of these are very important. And finally, we want people to be able to recognize the things that trigger them. And in those triggers, we want to use calming, centering, and strategies to help them stay present. With triggering, sometimes we have avoidance is generally the strategy people with trauma will use to get away from something that is triggering them. And what we need to do is perhaps teach them how to scaffold, how to sandwich when a trigger comes up, or be aware. I briefly mention my trauma history, or my fact that I have struggled with PTSD. And in my healing and recovery journey, one of the things I did not know was triggering me, but came to realize, was the sound of sirens. So sirens, I would sometimes hear these when there were no sirens there. And that was a flashback for me, going back, something that triggered a memory that brought me back in time. Another issue with the sirens, what I came to realize was, at one point I lived in an apartment building, and whenever the fans came on, they made a sound like the sound of a whirring siren. And so that sound automatically put me in you see what my body's doing, in the alert, the constricted mode, and the fearful mode, like what's going on. So then when you have this going on and you don't understand what the trigger is, you create a narrative, a story to explain what's going on. So recognizing triggers is an extremely important part, and not forcing people to confront triggers. But to help them learn to recognize, manage, and work with them. And the calming, centering, staying present helps quiet the biology. So what we also want to understand is when our biology is activated, I want to be able to quiet it. 4 things that we can do, and I'm sorry, we're not going to have too much time with this right now, but first of all, draw a gingerbread body and mark it up with great colors wherever you notice your stress warning signs. Because the minute you start to notice the tension in your body, that's an idea that you need to perhaps develop some strategies. The Calm app. I don't know if you know about that, CALM, the Calm app, that works. There's also another app called the Virtual Hope Box and Provider Resilience. These will also be very helpful. Managing your reactions, we're going to do that with yoga and meditation shortly. Manage your thoughts. We want to replace unhelpful thinking with helpful thinking. And finally, so what is the difference between pessimistic, optimistic, helpful, and unhelpful? Unhelpful thinking may actually be correct. It's like, oh my gosh, this COVID-19 is absolutely horrible. I don't know that there's ever going to be an end in sight. Okay, that's the thinking. I don't know if I'll ever get to see anybody again. Now, you may be right, but that's not helping you ease your stress or manage your life. So we replace that with a helpful thought. Wow, this COVID-19 is a challenge I never thought I'd have to see in my lifetime. But here it is. Okay, what small steps can I take to help me cope and manage? And then, of course, with your social connection, how can we do this safely? What are the ways we are learning to socially connect without being in physical proximity? And start to reach out, develop your network. I mean, for a while, people in your network maybe, you know, whatever humorous TV show, these characters can actually work for you. Oh, I can't wait to be with them. So, and finally, Gandhi said, be the change. So we've talked about the idea of self-compassion. And now I would like you to take out your cell phone, and I would like you to put it in selfie mode. Can you all do this? I'm going to close the screen. And let's go to full view. We got everybody? Okay, so go into selfie mode and think of your happiest picture. Make a happy, happy face and take your picture. And now print that picture and put it on your refrigerator or make it your screensaver. So every time you feel a little distressed or concerned, hold that up. Okay. That was the world of trauma in 30 minutes or less. I didn't think it was possible.
That was awesome, Mary. Thank you. And
thank you. Any questions?
Okay? Yeah, I have, there's some questions. I'm going to leave my camera off just because I feel like the connection is probably better that way. But the first question is around, are there any existing task forces in place to sort of provide assistance to the frontline workers who were out there during, you know, the worst of COVID-19 and have obviously been traumatized in so many different ways and could be suffering from PTSD? Is there any like effort for this group specifically that is either in the works, or what are we doing to support them, or how can we support them after, years and months and years down the road?
This is one of the very huge questions, and I don't know of the actual initiatives that are in place. I do know that there has been an application for federal funding through FEMA, and there is or will be a grant coming down to work on emotional recovery. The issues of trauma are perhaps going to go on for a long time, particularly for frontline workers. So, but again, I think we're in the planning and prep phase, although there have been hotlines and helplines specifically for frontline workers. Frontline workers have needed trauma programs long before COVID-19. So perhaps one of the important things of this particular pandemic is maybe we're going to break down those walls of, I'm strong, I know how to take this. And help people. But in terms of giving you an exact program or whatever, I don't happen to know of that. I just know that it's happening.
Yeah, which is good, because I think at least it's in the works and it's going to be important. And to your point, it's yes, trauma, work on that for frontline workers is needed long, before and long after sort of what we're dealing with COVID-19. So thank you for that. Another question is around, are there any tips or tricks, or how can we approach talking to a loved one who might need help, but maybe doesn't, they haven't accepted it yet, or it's just that tough conversation? Like, how do you approach those conversations? Is there anything to keep in mind, or, anything around that?
That's always a difficult response to give because of the dynamics of all of the dynamics that come in. But I do know with suicide awareness training, for instance, what we say to people is, if you're concerned about somebody, say something. Even if it upsets them, at least they know you've been concerned, and they may react initially in an inappropriate, defensive way, but that doesn't mean that they're not thinking about they're not thinking about what you've said. Always the idea of showing appreciation, starting off, leading off with, not the things you're doing wrong, but the strengths you have. And then perhaps to say, I'm wondering if you've noticed. So you kind of gentle it out. Remember that people with trauma aren't going to disclose if they don't feel safe, because they don't know what your reaction is going to be. So you just put things out there. There are some people who will not speak in feeling vocabularies. I have a family member like this, so I just have to very gently say, well, if I'm wishing you every best thing, and if there's anything I can do, just seems like that was a really tough thing you went through, and then dropping it, not beating the horse. And
Yeah.
I know that's hard, but it's as again, the Bishop of Rumbeck, it doesn't take a superstar, it takes a person who knows how to listen. So we have to be very good at listening appreciatively and honoring where a person is at. Unless, of course, we are concerned about actions they are taking, and we are concerned that they may be endangering themselves or others, or maybe at risk for suicide. And in that case, we want to ask directly. We want to say, are you thinking of taking your life? We want to acknowledge that there may be pain and they're in this pain and suffering, but something to the effect of, gee, that sounds like you're really dealing with an awful lot. And I've noticed that, you seem to not be coming to family anymore. You seem not to be connecting or doing things you used to like to do. I have to ask you because I'm concerned. Are you thinking about taking your life? And then always, if you have concern, you can always call the New Jersey Hope Line or the Suicide Prevention Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-TALK. So the idea is, if you are concerned, make a call, ask questions. You can call these hotlines, you can ask these questions. And we also have the COVID-19 hotline. And I am embarrassed to say I answer these calls, but I don't know what the number is. So just Google COVID-19 hotline, and that should be able to help you. Thanks, Samantha, for posting the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. They also have a text, 741-741. Crisis text line.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And we're just running out of time. I know everyone has a lot more questions. Mary, I think it's important. One of the questions is, how do we get access to your books and other resources from your work? So if we could maybe connect after this, I will include that information for everyone and send that out or put it on the website. But that's all we really have time for today. Thank you so much. If you're open to it, I can share your email or contact information with our members.
Please do. Please do. Yes, absolutely. My website's under construction or reconstruction, so
Okay.
Seemed like a good time to do that when it crashed. And I certainly be happy to get that information. Thank you all for being here and for your interest in this very important topic. And now let's just have some great yoga with Karen.
I know. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm so excited.
Thank you so much, Mary. So next we have Karen Weinstein. Some of you might remember her. She's done stretching and yoga activities with us before in our in-person program. So hi, Karen. Thank you for being back here with us.
Hi.
I'm so excited to move into this meditation, stretching, all that good stuff. Karen is a yoga teacher. She teaches meditation, relaxation, mindfulness, and she has public, private, corporate classes and workshops. So she's a great connection to have. If you ever need movement and yoga in your day, or if it's something that you want to bring to your company, she's a great connection for that. So Thank you, Karen. And let's get right into it because I'm ready to go.
All right, great. Thank you so much for having me here, first of all. So I'm assuming everybody is sitting already. So what I'd like you to do is move to the front edge of your chair. So you're coming toward me so that you're sitting in a way where your feet are about hip distance apart and you can really feel your feet on the ground. Even if you're wearing shoes, or if you have shoes, you can slip off so that you could have your bare feet or stocking feet right against the floor. And then take your hands, just place them on your lap. Let your shoulders get nice and soft. And we're just going to start by moving the right shoulder only. So I just want you to take your right shoulder around in a big, slow circle. Like you're trying to test out your range of motion with your right shoulder. And we'll do that 2 more times. So just taking the right shoulder only all the way around. And then let your right shoulder rest. Close your eyes or drop your gaze to the floor. And I just want you to observe the difference between your right shoulder and your left shoulder. So when you've moved, one has been still. And I'm asking you to do this because our body speaks to us in the language of sensation. And so we can begin to start tuning in a little bit to differences between body parts that have been moved and that have been still, so that we can start listening a little bit more closely. So now we're going to switch sides, moving to your left shoulder, taking your left shoulder around in a couple of big, slow circles. Doesn't matter which direction you're going in. And again, it's as if you're trying to kind of test out your range of motion. You may find that there's a difference in your mobility on one shoulder, and that's all okay. You're just noticing. And then letting that left shoulder come to rest once more, allowing your eyes to close or drop your gaze to the floor. And just noticing, now you can contrast and compare a little bit. Right shoulder, left shoulder, just tuning into sensation there. And then when you're ready, allow your eyes to open. Take a big inhale, lift your arms all the way up overhead, interlace your fingers, press your palms up to the sky, get really long through the sides of your waist. And on your exhale, release your arms all the way back down. Place your hands on your kneecaps. On your inhale, roll your shoulders back, lift your chest, lift your chin a little bit, and arch your back. And on your exhale, tuck your tail, round your spine, drop your chin toward your chest. And you're just moving with your breath here. So on your inhale, arching your back, lift your chest. Exhale, tuck your tail, round your spine. We'll do that 2 more times. So moving with your breath at your pace. Movement could be big or small, just depends on how it feels in your body. And on your next inhale, we'll just come and sit up nice and tall again. Again, breathe in, lift your arms overhead, interlace your fingers, but this time take your hands right behind your head, elbows out nice and wide, and then turn your head to the right. So you're looking at your right elbow. And we're going to take a twist to the right as if you're reaching your right elbow back toward the wall behind you. Just opening up that right side of the chest, getting a little movement in the spine. And then come on back to center. And we're going to turn the head so you're looking at the left elbow now and do the same twist on the other side. So twisting to the left, imagine touching your left elbow to the wall behind you. And on your inhale, come on back to center. Release your arms all the way back down. Take your feet just a little bit wider. And on your inhale, lift your right arm up nice and high. Left hand can just rest on your lap, and we'll take a curve over to the left side. And then again, either close your eyes or drop your gaze for a moment and really focus on the right side of your body, your right waistline, your right rib cage, maybe up through your armpit. And just notice where you feel a sensation of stretch and what that sensation feels like in your body. And then when you're ready, come on back up nice and tall. Release your right hand down to your lap. Inhale, left arm up. And we'll do the same thing to the other side. So curving over to the right side. And then again, inviting yourself to close your eyes or drop your gaze so that you can shut out some of the external stimulus and really focus on the felt sense in your body. Noticing that left side waist, left rib cage, And maybe the stretch feels different on this side of your body. No judgment, just observation. And then coming back up and releasing your hand back down. And when you're ready, heel toe your feet back to that comfortable distance apart, hip distance a little wider is fine. And either allow your eyes to close or drop your gaze. Take your attention all the way down to the soles of your feet. And begin to really notice the connection between your feet and the floor or the inside of your shoes if you're wearing them. See if you can feel the sensation underneath your big toe, underneath your pinky toe, and then all 10 toes at the same time. Notice the ball of your big toe, the ball of your pinky toe, the arch of your foot, the center of your heel. And see if you can really find a sense of being connected to the ground underneath you. And then take your awareness to where your buttocks and the back of your thighs are resting on your chair. And imagine the chair as an extension of the ground. So can you really feel a sense of being connected to what is supporting you? And then can you relax into that support a little bit? Let your face soften, let your jaw relax, let your shoulders soften. And then send your attention back down to the soles of your feet. And I just want you to notice any sensations in your feet. Noticing any sense of aliveness or tingling or pulsing. Not every sensation has a name. So it's okay to notice something that you can't put a label to. You don't have to. See if you can let go of the tendency to judge your experience and rather just let yourself be with it. And then take your attention to your ankles. And notice your right ankle, your left ankle. See if you can notice a sense of the inside of your ankle, a sense of the outer circumference around your ankle. And then take your attention to your calves. Just finding a felt sense of your calves. Finding a sense of your shins. Depending on what kind of clothing you've got on, maybe your lower legs are bare, or maybe there's some clothing there and you can find a sense of the touch of your clothing against your skin. Just keeping this really wide open awareness. And then taking your attention to your knees, noticing the way that they are bent at the moment. And just know if we come to an area of the body where there is some discomfort, you can always move back to a place that felt okay to you or a place that felt kind of neutral. So as you're aware of your knees, check in with the right knee, check in with the left knee. And then take your awareness to your thighs. See if you can notice the circumference of your thighs, the outer parts. See if you can find a felt sense of your inner thighs, the bones, the muscles, the tissues, the skin. Take awareness to your buttocks and where they're touching the chair. See if you can tune into that sense of touch or pressure. And again, I invite you, if any part of the body feels uncomfortable, to move your awareness back to a place where it felt okay. Just because I offer something doesn't mean that you have to go there. And then taking awareness to your hips. Finding an awareness of your spine from your tailbone tracing the length of your spine all the way along your back, up the back of your neck to the base of your skull. Finding a sense of its length and stability and noticing any sensations anywhere along the spine. And then taking your attention to your belly. Maybe noticing any shifting or moving at your belly as you breathe. Just taking a moment to observe that. And then shifting your attention a little higher, noticing your rib cage. And again, observing any movement in your ribs as you breathe in and out. Noticing the muscles of your chest, right side of the chest, left side. Noticing the back of your rib cage, your shoulder blades. And then taking your awareness all the way to your fingertips. Because there's so many nerve endings in the fingers, we get lots of information, and you might find a heightened awareness of sensation there. If your fingers are in contact with your legs or cloth, see if you can notice what that feels like. Maybe you notice the temperature of your hands, your felt sense of the temperature of your hands. Your fingers warm or cool, somewhere in between. And then in that same way, just taking your attention, scanning all the way up your arms, your wrists, forearms, elbows, upper arms and shoulders. Noticing the way the tops of your shoulders blend into the side of your neck and finding a sense of your neck, your throat. Maybe as you breathe, you feel the breath passing through your throat on its way in and out. And then just finding a sense of the muscles of your face, your jaw, your lips, your teeth, your tongue, your eyes, your ears. Finding a felt sense of your entire head. Noticing your torso. Noticing your arms. Noticing your legs, your feet. And then see if you can feel your whole body all at the same time. See if you can feel your whole body breathing. Not changing or manipulating your breath, just allowing it to be as it is naturally. Just observing, letting go of the need to manage. And then just focusing on your breath for 3 inhales and exhales. Feeling the sensation of your breath in your nose or your chest or your belly. Just 3 breaths. And then when you feel ready, if your eyes are closed, very gently allow them to flutter open. And thank you so much for letting me be part of your day. The light in my heart bows to the light in yours.
Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you.
That was amazing. Everyone, we're right at time. So thank you all for joining us today. Thank you again to Mary and Karen. You guys brought so much clarity and light and information that we all needed. So thank you for that. And to everyone else, if you have any questions, feel free to email myself, Mary, or Karen. And as always, we will share a presentation Just one last point. I know people were asking about the presentations from previous sessions. Those are all up on the website under the events tab under past events. So feel free to check those out. And thank you guys for joining. We will talk to you all next week. Thank you guys.